Hello everyone, Reza here. We are going to continue with our Marvelous Designer for Beginners series. This is the third video, and in this one we are going to talk about unfolding, draping, and introduction to sewing in Marvelous Designer. All three topics are connected and at the same time very important. So let's get to it. All right, let's start. I'm gonna go and import my base mesh. Import. We have covered this in our lesson 1. And make sure that automatically add arrangement points is enabled and load my mesh. We instantly get the silhouette of it in the 2D pattern window, and I start by drawing my 2D patterns on the silhouette. Now the way that I approach this is quite similar to the way that modelers and sculptors tend to work. I start from one half and focus on one half and then mirror things to the other side to save time, and at the same time you can create a link between the mirrored section and the original section. So ideally you want to know these tools about lines that we have and internal lines that we have. So let's start with a good old polygon. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit and start from the middle, click, and with the left mouse button held down, you can actually drag and create a Bezier curve that the line gets purple, says that, all right, this is a straight line. If you want to go straight line, I'm gonna click here, gonna get a little bit of curve in here as well. Just going to draw it all the way to here. And again, hold down Shift just to draw a straight line and click. You may say, well, how are we going to arrange those points? Again, this is something that we have talked about in the past. You can select any point at any point of time and just take care of the Bezier tangent, so on and so forth. Now, I have to admit, that's not exactly how I work. I tend to delete these points, and I know it sounds a bit strange and counterintuitive a little bit, and this is by no means the way to go. This is just my approach. I try to make it as blocky as possible and use the tools that I covered in the previous session. For example, edit curvature is a perfect scenario to give me a nice curvature, and you look at that, the smoothness of the curvature is much more accurate if you use this tool instead of manually adjusting your Bezier curve. So you can see that instantly with that tool we get a great result. I can switch to edit pattern, go over here and change some of these points. Probably move this forward and go edit curve and give this a slight curvature, and you can see right off the bat we're getting something quite pleasing, and that should do the job for one side. Again, feel free to spend the time and add bits and pieces to this. For example, I can just move this here and we use this Bezier to add a little bit of sharpness to the edge. If I want to, I can select this one and fix that, something like that. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the design because that's not really the focus of this video. So let's say what we have is good for the front side. It's actually time to duplicate this and create the exact same thing for the back of the character. The reason that I tend to do that before I mirror it to the other side is to make sure that the sides that will be linked together are gonna just stand against each other. It makes it a lot easier for me to sew when I do that at the end. So I'm going to go and press A or select the transform pattern tool, right click and go copy and move your mouse in the negative space, not on the pattern, but in the negative space, and right click, mirror, paste. If you ask me, memorize the shortcut, Control R, and holding down Shift and create a duplicate of that. Now this is front and this is back, but now I know that this line, if I go and select edit pattern, I know this line needs to be sewn to this line and this line needs to be connected to this line. This is by no means a mandatory step. It's optional, but it helps you to navigate better, and once you flip the backside, it all falls into the right place. Time to mirror. Now for mirroring, I'm going to use a very, very useful tool called Unfold. What Unfold does, it drafts and unfolds a half pattern to convert and use it as a full pattern. So let's see how it's going to work. To unfold, you don't need to select the entire model, so you don't need to have the transform pattern selected. You actually need to go to edit pattern because we're about to select a segment, and that segment is going to be our axis. And whatever you are going to mirror, the tool is going to look at the axis that you have selected, which is this segment right here, and it's going to mirror it to the opposite side. We're not doing it in 3D, so we have Y and X, and in this example is going to be along minus X axis. All you need to do is just to select the segment and then right click on it, and we have two options in here, and it's on the category of merging, and rightfully so, because you're about to actually merge these two pieces. One is unfold and the other one is unfold symmetric editing. I personally tend to go with unfold symmetric editing, and I will show you the difference. On the surface, they do exactly a similar job. Visually speaking, when you go with unfold symmetry, you get a line in the middle. Now let me just show you the difference between this and the normal unfold. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to select the axis, and it doesn't need to be at the center. You can see that this one is at the center, but with this one it's off center, but we specified this segment so we have a pivot to rotate it around that pivot. So I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to select unfold. Well, we're not going to get that line just like we did with the other tool, but let me show you the real difference. If I move forward with the fabric and then realize hypothetically that, oh, these 2 points are a bit high, I can easily go into edit pattern and select these two, and you can see instantly I'm selecting the other two. So it kind of connects or links the symmetry, if I may, and you can just reposition them and it will have an impact on both sides. It's very, very useful. However, in this case, if I realize that one side needs to be fixed and the other side needs to follow, you cannot do that if you just simply unfold it. So at early stages, my recommendation is to use the other unfold, which is unfold symmetric, and have that link. You can always merge the line in the middle and get rid of it, but just have it until you're super confident about your design, and then you can move forward with normal unfold with no hiccups. So for this one, again, I'm going to Control Z to undo and use unfold symmetric instead. Now the back of the dress is also good to go. In this one, I'm going to select the point and just ever so slightly move it up and change the Beziers a little bit. Probably I'm going to go to edit curvature and just dial down the curvature ever so slightly. All right, that's good. I'm just going to look at the fabric here. you can actually right click on it and say flip horizontally. So we have the right direction. I can just move this back, pressing W to just see the move tool. It would be a good idea just to align them to make sure that they have the same location. I mean, it's not really mandatory, but I tend to be a little bit more accurate with my design and make it as close as possible to the object to make the sewing process easier for Marvelous Designer. Again, this is the absolute simplest form of a dress, and I'm using this as an excuse to get into sewing, which comes next. Now for sewing, we can use this menu right here. In Marvelous 11, we have a drop down and every single sewing tool are lined up in this drop down menu. I can click on this scissor icon, tear off the menu, bring it to the side, and let's explore them. The most commonly used sewing tool is segment sewing. The way this tool works, the objective of this tool is to establish sewing lines on segments of patterns or internal lines. So all you need to do is to carefully select two segments, and when you simulate, those patterns will be sewn. So let's see how it works. It's actually fairly straightforward. There is a simple catch to that, and we are going to talk about that. Let's actually connect these two pieces. Let's sew them together. I'm going to select segment sewing. Now, here's the only part that you need to be mindful of. You can see if I move my mouse along this segment, I get notches. You kind of need to think about where you place your notches, and when you select your second segment, go with the same location of that notch. Otherwise, your sew will be reversed. Now, if it doesn't make much sense, let's follow this so we see how this tool works. So I'm going to click, and you can see now one side has been selected, and I'm going to go to the other one, and for this one I'm going to select the same location. So this one is the upper notch and this one is the lower notch. I'm going to select the upper notch again. If I zoom back a little bit, it's actually quite easy to see what the reverse would be look like. So this is straight and this is reversed. This is straight and this is reversed. Try to avoid having that cross in the middle and make sure you have a straight line between two patterns. Now I'm going to click, and because I used unfold symmetric, both sides now gets linked. How about that? And that's where I said if you use that tool, you save 1 second here, 1 second there, and it makes the job a lot easier for you. So thanks to Unfold Symmetric, now we have both sides linked with just one single click. If I simulate, you can see we successfully managed to connect those two patterns. Press A, select these pieces, and Control F to bring the arrangement or to reset the 3D arrangements. Let's talk about the other type of sewing, and that is free sewing. Let's talk about free sewing. And by the way, I just moved those patterns a little bit higher, so there's no intersection between the avatar and any of these lines. Free sewing. So basically, the main difference between free sewing and segment sewing is with segment sewing, you select two segments and those two segments are equal in length. With free sewing, it can be anything. You freely establish your sewing lines on the pattern outlines and of course on the internal lines at the same time. Very, very straightforward. So if I go free sewing, and let's say we want to sew these two using free sewing, I can actually do it a wrong way and right way, however I want to. I can go click, and then you define where you want to end your sewing without any limitation or restriction. Let's say I'm just going to go halfway through here, and I'm going to select and go maybe longer here without even getting to the end of the pattern. And you can simulate. And that's the type of result that you're getting. You can see a little bit of leftover here, a little bit of leftover there, which results of these two pieces not sewing together. You can even pick up where you left off and create the second round of sewing. There you go. And if I click, you can see those are patched together as well, which is not really a common thing. You can just edit your existing sewing and fix it, but I just wanted to show you that anything is possible with free sewing. Now, based on how you sew, sometimes you need to go back and edit your sew. And that's exactly one example that we just ran into, where I need to delete the existing secondary sew and just fix the first one and get a much simpler result. In that case, you go and pick edit sewing. With edit sewing, you can select and it shows you all the lines. You can select the line and press delete on it, or you can zoom in, right click on it. I'm going to select the red one and delete this one. With edit sewing selected, you can actually select these points and modify it. So you really don't need to. In that case, I really didn't need to bring the secondary line, simulate, and get a much cleaner result. Sometimes you realize that everything is not actually where you want to. So for example, you have this one, but your starting point is upside down. Remember that cross situation that I was talking about? No problem at all. Again, with edit sewing, you can right click and reverse the pattern to fix that cross pattern. And then you can select these points and just nudge them to the right place. Now let's see what MN sewing is about. We have MN segment sewing and MN free sewing. Well, the segment part and the free part are exactly the same. With segment, you just select the segment once, and with free, you draw start and the end point. So that's that. But the NM is for multiple. So unlike, let's say, segment sewing, when you select one segment in one fabric or one pattern and another segment in another pattern, you can select multiple patterns and select multiple patterns on the other fabric and stitch them all together in one go. That's the only difference. So I'm going to draw some lines really quickly, just some polygon pattern outlines, nothing too specific. You all know how to make that. I'm just going to be a little bit more quick about it. I'm going to go to edit pattern, select the first one and unfold it, and then select the patch and go to copy. And then in here, I'm going to go mirror paste and just paste them to the other side. Now it's time to use MN sewing. Again, just like segment sewing and free sewing, you just need to be mindful of where you place your notches. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to put all the notches on the left hand side, and I'm going to connect it to the to these two segments right here. So with segment sewing, left and then left, and then I press enter. Now one side is done, you need to select multiple sides. Again, I'm going to go with left in this patch and left in this patch and left in this patch, and I'm keep selecting the left hand side and press enter. And you can see there is no reversed stitch, but if there is, you know what to do. Edit sewing, right click, reversed. Now that is done, you can see each sew is identified by a different color. Now if I press simulate, it's going to simulate it. I mean, it's not the most fashionable, pleasing design. You can see definitely I have no future in fashion with that type of design, but you know, you got the gist. That's how the tool works, and the exact same method applies to free sewing. Instead of click, you measure start and end, and measure start and end, and click, measure start and end, and click, and when you finish you press enter. So that's how M.N works. Now we're about to wrap up this one, but before we do, there are a few points that I would like to go through. So one is fit maps. Now if I go in here, I have strain map and pressure point. So strain map is actually quite useful to see how much garment distortion you're getting per area. You get a lot of reds, and as you can see, the indicator shows that when you have around 120% distortion, you get the red areas. So these areas are distorted pretty badly, and as you move in here to the blue color, that indicates 100%, so no distortion. So if I were to just move this, you can see I'm distorting it a little bit. So if fabric is loose enough to kind of hang and have natural fold like this area and this area, you can see the color is going to be sort of cooler as opposed to stretched area. Another type of mat that shows you this, that you can sanity check sort of the quality of your garment, is pressure points. And they do similar job. They show how much pressure garment is actually getting and how much stretch the garment is getting. So the areas that the body pushes against the garment, you get that pressure points. And again, we will talk about this more in future lessons, but I just wanted to introduce these tools to you, so when I use them, you kind of have a good understanding of where to find them in your own project. Also, it would be a good idea for you to just start designing or adding details in your 2D pattern using what you've learned so far. I'm just going to very quickly show you something really simple. For example, I can go in here and select this point, and I can actually go in here and say smooth curve. I'm changing this and adding a curvature here, and as soon as I do that, that middle line goes away. That allows you to do whatever you want without having that symmetry enabled. I think that kind of curve is going to help the design a little bit. And of course, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. For example, you can go to internal polygon line, click here and hold down shift, click here. You can just go to edit pattern, select this line, right click on it and say offset as internal line. You can just offset it by 10 millimeter as an internal line. In order for this to reach the border line, we already talked about this in a few videos, but let's just do a recap quickly. You can go extend, trim, and to pattern outline, so they reach the pattern outline, those internal lines. And then you can select these two, and with these two selected, you can kind of right click on it and say cut and sew. Now cut and sew works beautifully because it gives you this sort of look. Now this may not be necessarily what you're looking for, but you can select these two, right click and say go merge if one line is what you want, whatever works. So you can offset those as well, so you can go offset as internal line and get an internal line, and with this internal line you can play around with the fold strength and fold angle or what have you, and then you can simulate. So you can see that there are things that you can do to add to the complexity of your design. We will talk a lot about how you can just create a garment from scratch. The intention of this video was not to focus on any designs. It was basically an excuse to teach you sewing, but we will get to that where we talk about different types of garments and a basic level of garment creation and intermediate to even advanced level of garment creation. Hopefully by the end of this video you know how to use sewing tools and what unfold does, the difference between a normal unfold and symmetric unfold, so on and so forth. Let's go to the next video and explore more tools and add to what we already know. Hope you found this video useful and see you in the next one.